The house stood on the edge of a forgotten road, its wooden frame sagging like a weary traveler. The air around it was always a little too still, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. Elena Caro had not stepped onto the porch since she was a child, but now, years later, she stood with a rusted key in her hand, staring up at her grandmother's house. She wasn't sure why she had come back. Perhaps it was the letter from the lawyer saying the house now belonged to her. Perhaps it was the need to see if her memories, those half-remembered nights of hushed voices and lullabies that seemed to come from nowhere, were real. Or perhaps it was because she had nowhere else to go. Her fingers tightened around the key. The boards groaned beneath her boots as she pushed the door open. Dust spilled into the light like smoke, and the smell, mothballs, wood rot, and something faintly metallic, rushed to greet her. "Home," she whispered, though the word sounded like a lie. The house was silent, save for the creak of her steps, yet there was another sound, faint, almost imagined. She paused, head tilted. A note, a single wavering piano note drifting down from above. Her chest tightened. The attic. Number that was impossible. The piano was broken. She remembered that clearly. Her grandmother had told her the strings had snapped long ago, after a storm had let water through the roof. But still, another note followed. Longer, sadder, as though someone had pressed a key with deliberate care. Elena shook her head and forced herself up the stairs, muttering, "Old houses make old sounds." And then she heard it, a low growl from behind the broken fence in the yard. She froze at the top of the stairs, peering out through the cracked window. In the overgrown weeds, a dog stood, large, lean, its coat black as coal, eyes glinting in the wan light. It wasn't moving, only watching. Elena's breath caught. She should have been afraid, but instead, she felt an odd pull toward it. The dog tilted its head, then disappeared into the tall grass. The first night, she barely slept. The mattress smelled of mildew, and the house groaned with every gust of wind. At midnight, she woke to the sound again. Music, notes weaving through the air, forming the outline of a melody. Her skin prickled. She told herself not to move. But then came the scratching at the door. Low, insistent, heart-pounding, she opened it, just a crack. There sat the black dog, on the porch. Silent, still, waiting. Elena should have shut the door. Instead, she stepped out, whispering, "Hey, boy." The dog's eyes caught the moonlight. For a moment, she thought she saw something human in them. Sorrow, maybe. It pressed its head gently against her hand, and warmth rushed into her chest. She glanced up at the attic window. The music had stopped. Over the next days, Elena tried to settle into the house. She cleaned the kitchen, opened the shutters, and burned old wood in the fireplace to drive out the damp. The dog never left. It slept by the porch in the day, and at night, it paced restlessly under her window, growling whenever the piano notes drifted through the air. It had no collar, no name. She called it Ash, because of its dark coat, because of the way it seemed to rise from the shadows themselves. Ash followed her everywhere, though he never barked. His silence was unsettling, but also comforting. Sometimes, when the house felt too heavy, she would bury her face in his fur, and the weight would ease. Still, the attic called to her. On the 7th night, she couldn't resist. With Ash at her heels, she climbed the narrow stairs. Each step moaned beneath her weight, and the air grew colder the higher she went. She pushed open the attic door, the hinges shrieking like a warning. There it was, the piano. It sat beneath the slanted roof, draped in cobwebs, its wood scarred and split. Dust coated the keys, but some of them. Some looked cleaner, as though recently pressed. Elena's breath fogged in the chill. She reached out, hesitant, trembling, and tapped a key. A dull thud. Dead. But as she pulled her hand away, another key sank down on its own. A note rang, clear and aching, echoing off the rafters. Elena stumbled back, colliding with Ash. The dog's fur bristled, teeth bared in a silent snarl, his eyes locked on the piano. Then, 3 notes in succession, a fragment of a song. Elena grabbed the doorknob and fled, Ash bounding after her. She slammed the door shut, heart hammering so hard it hurt. She didn't sleep at all that night. The days bled into one another. Elena stopped trying to convince herself it was nothing. The piano played every night, always when she was alone, always just enough to make her feel watched. She found herself searching for answers in her grandmother's belongings. Boxes of letters, faded photographs, brittle newspaper clippings. She learned things she hadn't known before, that her grandmother had once been a music teacher, that there had been a child, a son, who had died before Elena was born. No details, only whispers on yellowed paper. Ash grew restless. He paced the halls at night, always stopping at the attic stairs, growling low in his throat. Sometimes he refused to eat until Elena sat beside him, hand on his back, reminding him he wasn't alone. And yet, sometimes she thought he knew more than she did. One evening, as storm clouds rolled across the horizon, Elena lit candles in the kitchen. She had almost begun to feel safe in the glow when the first note rang from above. Louder this time, insistent. Ash whined, pressing against her legs. Another note followed, then another. The melody was growing. Elena, her blood froze. It wasn't just music, it was a voice, faint, woven through the notes, calling her name. She dropped the candle, wax splattered across the table. Ash barked, sharp, breaking his silence for the first time. The house trembled as though struck by thunder. The storm lashed the house all night. Rain hammered the roof, wind rattled the shutters, but through it all the piano played. Not random notes anymore. No, this was deliberate. A melody, sorrowful and drawn out, rising and falling like a voice trying to speak through music. Elena huddled in the kitchen, clutching Ash's thick fur. The dog growled low, muscles tense as though he was ready to throw himself at an unseen enemy. When the storm finally eased, the music faded into silence. But the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. The next morning, Elena tried to convince herself it had been her imagination. But when she opened the attic door in daylight, she froze. The piano keys were smeared with dust, except for several, clean, as though someone had played them for hours. On the floor beside it, in the thick dust, were footprints, small, child-sized. Ash whined, nudging her leg, urging her back down the stairs. She didn't argue. That day, she found more letters in a cedar chest under her grandmother's bed. They were brittle, faded, tied with ribbon. Most were written in her grandmother's careful script, but a few were shakier, messier, the handwriting of someone younger. I hear him in the attic. He says he can't rest. The dog is the only one who sees him.
Hey there.
Elena read the lines over and over. Her throat tightened. Her grandmother hadn't been alone in this. That night, Elena dreamed of the piano. She dreamed of a little boy sitting before it, his hands moving over the keys. His face was pale, blurred by shadow, but she felt his sadness in every note. When she woke, Ash was standing at the window, ears pricked, staring toward the attic. The first thin notes of the melody floated down. Elena whispered, "What does he want?" Ash turned, his eyes glinting. For the briefest second, she thought she saw the reflection of the piano in them. The days grew heavier. The air in the house seemed thicker, colder. Even sunlight through the windows felt dimmed. Sometimes Elena swore she heard footsteps above her during the day. Sometimes she caught a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, a boy's shadow slipping away. Ash became her anchor. She spoke to him constantly, even when she didn't expect answers. At night, she rested her hand on his back and felt his heartbeat steady against her palm, grounding her when the house felt too alive. But Ash was changing too. He would sit for hours staring at the attic door, chest rumbling with a growl too soft to be called a threat, too steady to be ignored. On the 10th night, Elena gathered her courage. She lit a lantern and climbed to the attic. Ash pressed close at her side. The piano stood in its usual place, but this time she wasn't greeted with silence. The keys moved, slowly, deliberately, playing a melody she didn't know but felt she had heard all her life. Her breath came shallow. "Ash," she whispered, but the dog stood rigid, hackles raised, eyes glowing in the lantern light. The music swelled. And then, words, not spoken, but sung through the notes. "Find me." The lantern shook in her hand. "Who are you?" Elena asked, though her voice cracked. The melody shifted, stumbling, as though the answer itself was fractured. "Brother, lost, locked away." Her knees buckled. She clutched the piano for balance. Her grandmother had lost a child, a boy, but locked away? Ash barked sharply, startling her, his eyes fixed on the far wall of the attic. Elena followed his gaze. There, behind a stack of broken furniture, was a panel in the wall, warped but distinct. Heart pounding, she dragged the pieces aside, Ash pacing anxiously at her side. She pulled the panel, and it gave way with a groan of splintering wood. Behind it was a hollow space, and in that hollow, a box. Elena carried it down to the kitchen, setting it on the table. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside lay photographs, yellowed sheet music, and a journal. She flipped through the pages. The handwriting was childish at first, then grew neater with age. It spoke of lessons, songs, afternoons spent at the piano. Then, abruptly, darker entries. "He's angry when I play. She says I must stop, but I can't. The notes come on their own now. They follow me." Elena's mouth went dry. The last entry chilled her to the bone. "The dog won't leave me. He guards me when it happens, but I think he knows I won't be here long." Elena looked at Ash. He sat in the corner, watching her, silent, steady. His eyes seemed older than they should be. "Who are you really?" she whispered. The dog didn't move, but somewhere above them, the piano began to play again. Elena sat frozen at the table, the journal open in front of her. The words blurred, but their weight pressed on her chest. A child, a brother she never knew existed, a piano that played on its own, and always, the dog. She turned to Ash. His steady, unblinking eyes reflected the candlelight. "You've been here before, haven't you?" Her voice trembled. "You were his dog." The silence that followed was heavier than denial. Above, the piano swelled into another melody. Faster this time, urgent, demanding. Ash stood, ears pricked, growl low in his throat. He nudged her arm, then turned toward the stairs as if urging her to follow. The attic door groaned as she opened it. The lantern's flame flickered wildly, though there was no draft. The music wrapped around her like vines, tugging her deeper into the room. Ash padded forward, steady, unafraid. He stopped at the piano, sat down, and lifted his head toward the ceiling. His body was rigid, but his eyes never left the keys. The piano stilled. For a heartbeat, silence. Then a whisper, faint but sharp as broken glass. "Why did she hide me?" Elena's breath caught. "Who?" The notes struck again, jagged, angry. The words came through them, warping the air. "Mother. She locked me away. She said the house was safer without me. She said the music wasn't mine. But it was. It was always mine." Elena's stomach turned. She thought of her grandmother, the gentle woman who sang lullabies, who made tea in delicate porcelain cups. Could she have hidden a child in this house? Ash growled, low and steady, his gaze fixed on the piano as though warning it to stay still. But the keys rattled, striking on their own, faster and louder until the melody twisted into something furious. The lantern's flame sputtered, shadows lunged across the rafters like grasping hands. Elena clutched Ash's fur. "What do you want from me?" she cried. The answer came as a crashing chord that rattled the floorboards. "Remember me." The attic spun. Elena stumbled, clutching her head as flashes pierced her vision. Memories that weren't hers. A boy in a white shirt sitting at the piano, his face pale with hunger. A woman's voice shouting, weeping, the door closing, the lock turning, the boy pressing the keys anyway, desperate, as though the music itself was his only air. And beside him, a black dog, guarding, watching. Elena gasped, and the vision snapped away. Ash pressed against her, steadying her shaking body. She buried her face into his fur, tears stinging her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the dark. "I didn't know. I didn't know." The piano softened, shifting into a fragile lullaby, a melody that might once have soothed a child to sleep. Elena's heart cracked. She let the notes wash over her, aching with sorrow that wasn't hers, but felt carved into her bones. When the last note faded, she realized her cheeks were wet. The attic was still again. She turned to Ash. What now? But the dog only stared at her, eyes glinting in the dim light. She blinked, startled. For just an instant, she thought she saw another figure there, a boy's pale face overlaying the dog's, watching her with the same sorrowful eyes. She blinked again, and it was gone. Only Ash remained, silent and patient. Days passed. The music no longer came every night, but when it did, it was softer, gentler, almost as if the boy was playing not in anger, but in remembrance. Elena spent her time restoring the house. She mended broken shutters, cleared dust, and brought in flowers from the overgrown garden. Somehow, she felt less alone. Ash never left her side. But the deeper comfort he gave, the deeper her unease grew. Because sometimes, in the dead of night, she would wake to find him standing at the attic door, staring up, ears pricked as though listening. Sometimes she thought she saw dust shift on the piano keys, faint as a sigh, and once, only once, she woke to hear her own name whispered in a child's voice. Weeks later, she took Ash for a walk down the forgotten road. The air smelled of rain, the horizon heavy with clouds. As they reached the fence line, an old man appeared from the neighboring field, leaning on his cane. His eyes lingered on Ash. "You found him," the man said softly. Elena frowned. "You mean my dog?" The man shook his head. "That dog's been here longer than you've been alive, longer than me even. He waits at this house, always has. Folks say he's bound to it, bound to what happened here." Elena's stomach twisted. She looked down at Ash, who gazed up at her with calm, steady eyes. The man's voice lowered. "Careful, miss. Some bonds don't let go easy." And with that, he shuffled away, leaving her in the thickening dusk. That night, the piano played again. A lullaby, sweet, sorrowful. Elena sat on the floor beside Ash, her hand resting on his back. Tears slid down her cheeks as the melody filled the house, carrying both love and loss in every note. When the last sound faded, silence pressed heavy. She whispered into the dark, "I'll remember you." "I promise," Ash sighed, his body warm against hers. But just before sleep claimed her, she heard it, soft, almost tender. A child's voice close to her ear. "Don't forget, I'm still here." And the attic stayed waiting. The piano stayed waiting. And sometimes, in the black glass of Ash's eyes, she swore she saw the reflection of small, pale hands still pressing the keys, the end or not.